Hello, my name is Dan Davis, and today on MovieHole we're going to be talking about Pixar. Now, Pixar is an animation studio that, honestly, I think is probably the most, in terms of consistent quality, just out of any animation studio I've seen, and or any studio in general. They've gotten the most home runs. It's been a rocky start, but Pixar got there just immediately. And, it just surprised me how much, because I've seen Pixar. But in order to get talking about Pixar, we'll start from the beginning. So Pixar made some short animated features. Actually, Pixar's history is that Pixar was at one point, Steve Jobs was one of the people responsible for Pixar. As it's allegedly stated, he helped fund Toy Story, for example. And Pixar, at one point, they had connections with Lucasfilms, and some of the people actually worked on Star Wars Episode 6, The Return of the Jedi. So that was the early history of Pixar. But, before Pixar got purchased by Disney in around 2005, they used to be kind of an independent company that, like how Fox currently distributes DreamWorks films, Disney was like a distributor for Pixar films. But until the past 8 or 7 years or so years, they never really owned it, Pixar. It was actually just, independent of Disney. But that's kind of an early start about Pixar. So let's start with the very first Pixar movie, which is Toy Story. Toy Story is still one of Pixar's finest achievements. And it really, it was considered to be the very first computer-generated, completely 100% CGI film. We had CGI films like Aladdin, for example, used CGI, and Lion King used some CGI, but it was never fully used in a film. So Toy Story, it kind of started the CGI craze, even if it took a few years for the whole thing to kick up, because 2D animation was on its way out. CGI was the way of the future of films, animated films. So Toy Story came out, and it was incredible. Not only was it well animated, but it had an incredible story about differences, and Woody and Buzz were classic characters, and Sid was a great villain, and it just, the flying sequence is one of the most memorable sequences in movie history. Toy Story was an amazing film, and I loved it, and so did pretty much everybody. They went gaga over it, basically. Toy Story came out, and it was a huge hit. We started to look, I think, I was only young, so I didn't have any recollection of it, but I'm sure they started to think about Pixar and its potential. And Toy Story just really put them on the map, and it started their many years of quality in entertainment. And the concept was really unique. Toys coming to life, are really alive when nobody's looking, and it just had a great plot. So, that came along. We'll skip around to 4 years. We got Toy Story 2. I have very good, much better memories of seeing Toy Story 2 on the big screen. Toy Story 2, Toy Story 1 was emotional. Toy Story 2 was very emotional. Toy Story 2 had a very good plot. Toy Story 2 developed the characters. The toys were more active in it. You still had Woody. The plot involving Woody. Toy Story 2 introduced some new characters. And Toy Story 2, it had some bittersweet and sad songs involved in it. Toy Story 2 was one of the most perfect sequels. And it was one of the best ways you could do a sequel. So Toy Story 2. And so we're not going to talk about all Pixar movies, but we're going to talk about them all, but we're going to skip around and talk about them in specific series orders. So Toy Story 1 and 2 came out. Toy Story 2 came 4 years after Toy Story 1. So, I heard about Toy Story 3, and I assumed they were going to make one, but I remember as far back as 2005, the plot involved Woody getting lost in Africa and Buzz looking for him. And I always thought that was a weird plot, and I remember that being announced, but originally, it was going to be that Disney would do Toy Story 3 because the guys over at Pixar left them, but Disney still had the rights to them. But the issue was solved when Disney officially bought Pixar, ensuring that Pixar would make all their films for Disney now. They did, but they wouldn't walk off. The guys at Pixar wouldn't walk off and never come back. So Toy Story 3, I remember seeing the first trailer teaser about 2008, 2009. Looked rather interesting. Then I saw the film opening day, and I thought that Toy Story 3 was one of the best ways to end a trilogy. You've got the plot involving the toys at the daycare. them getting older, Andy getting older, but the toys never grow up because they're the same exact thing. And it was just, as far as films go, Toy Story 3 was a great movie. And it was so emotional like the other two, and just Lotso was a terrific villain, one of the best in 2010. I think he was the best villain in any movie in 2010. He was the best villain out of the three because Lotso, he comes off as this nice stuffed teddy bear, but in actuality he's vicious, he's mean. He was abandoned by his owner, or he thought he was abandoned, and he just seeks to keep order in his own way. Toy Story 3 has one of the best and most emotional endings of any trilogy I've ever seen, any movie ever. Made me cry. Toy Story 3. I'd grown up with these characters for all my childhood, and now 18, 17, to see them, to see them finally go, not officially go, but to see that Andy was leaving, it was just sad and heartbreaking, and Toy Story 3 was just great. Just overall, it was terrific. Not just the final scene or the chilling climax where they almost get killed, but all around, I just loved it. Great way to end a trilogy. So, I talked about those Toy Story films, and they made 3 of those, but Pixar's done plenty more than that. Pixar, of course, has done many great movies. So, Pixar, they make Toy Story, was a big hit in 1995. So before Toy Story came out, they made another movie in 1998. I don't know if I'd call it a little-known film, but it certainly isn't considered to be one of their finest, that being A Bug's Life. Now, I liked A Bug's Life, thought it was kind of clever, liked the designs, liked the animals, liked the insect story, liked the whole idea of them rising up, liked the circus performer characters, and all that. But A Bug's Life, just, my brother said in my DreamWorks episode, but to compare that to Ants, A Bug's Life is more, how would I put it, more kid-friendly. Out of all the Pixar films, I think it's one of the most kid-friendly in terms of humor. There's not a lot of adult jokes you can get. I wouldn't really call it a kid's film. It's still a family movie. But compared to, Ants, it really kind of falls short in that regard. But it's still a pretty good movie. And I like the characters. Kind of a disappointing follow-up after Toy Story. Of course, I loved it when I was 5, when I first saw it. But now growing up, it holds up pretty well, but not the greatest movie in the world. I liked A Bug's Life. I thought Flick was a good protagonist. Hopper was a great villain, actually, because he really had menace. He wasn't overly cheesy or, hamming it up. Kevin Spacey did a terrific job in that role. And I love that scene where he talks about the nuts falling. He throws, if one nut comes down, they all get us. I think that's a great speech, a great scene, a great villain, thing. Because it really represents of what the grasshoppers think of the ants and how they could potentially overpower them. So Bug's Life came out, Toy Story 2 came out. So, I cautiously waited. I didn't really think of much of this stuff at the time because I was only really young. But then I went to see Monsters, Inc., and I loved Monsters, Inc. I think Monsters, Inc. is one of Pixar's most clever and creative films. I like the whole universe building, the whole world where monsters, they attack humans. They scare children. But in actuality, monsters are afraid of children. Monsters are afraid of any humankind because they're different than what they perceive them as. And the whole corporate scamming, and Randall and Steve Buscemi as him, and he was a great villain, and he was sly, cunning. And, Boo was a great character because she was just a young child who happened to get there, and she was really cute. And the film is very bittersweet. Has a very bittersweet ending. But Monsters, Inc., you had a great voice cast, John Goodman and Billy Crystal as Sully and Mike. And, just all around it was a great time, and definitely one of Pixar's finest films, which isn't saying much considering how many great films they made. But Monsters, Inc. was just that. It had everything. It didn't have everything, but it was a very good movie. So Monsters, Inc. came out, was a hit. So now we waited cautiously. So, Didn't get a Pixar movie in 2002, just like we didn't get one in 2000. Disney made their usual 2D, was still making their 2D animated films. But they also tried their hands at a few 3D CGI animated films. So then in 2003 came what I believe is considered to be Pixar's biggest hit, even more so than Toy Story, Finding Nemo. Now, Finding Nemo, I'm not the biggest fan of Finding Nemo, I'll admit. There are a few things I don't like about Finding Nemo. I think Finding Nemo has a great father-son relationship, but it kind of, Dory is a fun character, but I think Marlin is just too much of a strict father. I get the whole point, but just doesn't come off as a really fun character to me, and I get that from Pixar, but I just wish he would loosen up. He does eventually, but it's by the end, because that's the whole point of the story, is that he comes to trust Nemo after his son gets kidnapped. By some divers. I liked Finding Nemo, and of course it became Pixar's biggest hit, and I liked some of the humor, fun stuff, very fun. So that came out, that was Pixar's biggest hit in 2003. So now we were starting to get another Pixar movie, only this time, instead of skipping a year, Pixar was going to go to 2004. And so in 2004, we got what might possibly be my favorite Pixar movie, perhaps in part due to the fact that I saw it on my birthday, The Incredibles. Now, I love superheroes, I really do. And Brad Bird, he made The Iron Giant, which was an animation masterpiece. And that was a great, great movie. So, for him to make The Incredibles, and for what he did, he obviously has love for the genre too. Because The Incredibles, it has loads of superhero references. It's a parody, superhero parody film. But you have a great family dynamic. Father was a former superhero, but after he caused some destruction, he had to hide his identity. But then he gets, he's called out of retirement. He still does crimes, but behind his wife's back, Mrs. Incredible or Elastigirl. And he's called to an island where a mysterious man named Syndrome has asked him to fight a machine, but it turns out the whole thing was just a ploy. And soon enough, he finds himself on the island running around, they're trying to get him killed. And his family finds out where he is. They come to rescue him. They're angry. And then they fight together as a family. And it's a great dynamic. And all the tropes of superheroes that it parodies, like the use of the cape, the cape isn't safe for any superhero, or the constant references or characters based off other characters, just great. It was loads of fun, and it was a really, really beautifully animated movie. That's the one thing, even if a Pixar movie is bad, you can still count on it to be beautifully animated. That's what I've come to realize, because DreamWorks, they can have some pretty so-so animation at times. But Pixar, I've not once seen a film by theirs that wasn't beautifully animated. Just bringing it up. In 2006, we got Cars. Now, Cars is until its sequel, Cars is considered to be Pixar's weakest film. And it's not hard to see why. Cars, while being beautifully animated, has one of the really generic storylines of the fast guy who's always going around. He doesn't look at other people. He's kind of, a snot. He's famous. He's popular. But then he gets lost and he goes to the middle town. And there he meets some people who change his perspective on his life. And that storyline's been done to death. And Lightning McQueen wasn't really a very bright character in terms of Pixar characters, protagonists. And of course, Larry the Cable Guy's Mater. Yeah, really. I know they think he was the most popular character, and I can see why. But they have to make him the center of attention of everything? I don't think so. Yeah, but Paul Newman was great as Doc Hudson. You had all the great voice actors you could recognize. And the animation, of course. So it was still a pretty solid movie. Saw that one in theaters. I've seen all Pixar movies in theaters. It's kind of a tradition every single year, at least until this year when there was none. It's always been my duty to see the newest Pixar movie on the big screen. Just love it. Great stuff. Cars 2. So Cars came out. So when they announced the Cars 2, I wondered why. But apparently, the thing about Cars was it was really Disney who made the sequels in a way. I mean, John Lasseter loved Cars and he wanted to make a sequel because it was kind of his dream baby, his dream project. So he just loved the universe of Cars. But Cars, even though Cars wasn't Pixar's most successful film box office wise, it was the one that made the most profits out of all the Pixar films. So boys, girls they all love Cars toys. People picked up products. So in a way, it's not hard to see why Disney wanted to make a sequel. So it came out Cars 2, and Cars 2 was a disappointment, severely a disappointment. And I say that Cars 2, it has lovely animation, there are some moments I laughed, but out of all the Pixar films, and this was coming after Toy Story 3, it's the most childish. Cars 3 has the problem of basically being a Cars movie, but having a real spy plot. That really, they should have just made a spy movie instead of adding in cars, because it doesn't really feel authentic. It just feels cheaply made, and the whole thing is just a cash grab almost. Well, except John Lasseter, but he almost acted George Lucas-like with his conversations. But Cars 2 was still a hit in revenue. But if we base things off revenues, then Cars 2 should have been the highest grossing Pixar film ever. It wasn't. It only made around $600 million. So it made a profit, yes, but, it kind of signaled what I consider to be Pixar's greatest. It wasn't as bad as some people say it was, but boy, did it get a beating. People hated it. And that was really, really sad because Pixar had these streaks of this unbeatable streak. Just kind of sad. I mean, Cars 2 happened, and Mater didn't need to be the focus of the story because, honestly, Larry the Cable Guy is not funny. And the fact that his fad kind of ended years ago really speaks of it. Just overly emphasizing on Mater was probably the most unright thing they could have done ever. So before we get to Cars 2, I just wanted to bring up that I forgot another movie. So when I talked about Monsters, Inc., just last year Pixar released the prequel Monsters University. So, I heard about it and I thought, a prequel to Monsters, Inc., is it really necessary? Then I thought to myself, I don't want Pixar doing sequels to all of their films. And I really don't think they should, unless Disney gets their hands on them completely. And it seems like Disney has their grubby hands on Pixar, so they're now demanding them to make sequels. So yeah, Pixar University, but it came out and I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, Pixar made a film that I really, really liked. Monsters University is not a great film. It doesn't have a great plot, not great character development, but boy, is it fun to watch. It's funny, more so than the first one. It works. It feels, it's basically a college parody movie in the veins of something like Animal House or Revenge of the Nerds, and it really works. I mean, you got the generic plot about the team, these two guys, they come there, they're separate. Mike and Sully meet each other at college. Mike is smart, but Sully is actually scarier and stronger. So they team up, they get kicked out, and they're not let into any of the cool classes. They join a geek fraternity or whatever. Koopa, they join that, and they enter in the scare games, and they try to win, and they eventually do, but some stuff happens, and eventually they're forced out of the college. But it implies that after that they went to the Monsters Institution to try and get jobs. So you know what happens in Monsters Inc. But Monsters University, even if it is a prequel, it never lets itself down as a prequel. It tries to establish new characters, new grounds. Not as disappointing as something like the Star Wars prequels. No, not at all. It's a pretty good prequel in that regard. And it's fun. I just laughed. It was entertaining. I did have a good time, and I did. And I liked it. Now, Brave was originally called The Bear and the Bow. And I think it should have been called that, because that is a more appropriate title. So I remember Brave. I remember how originally Reese Witherspoon was supposed to voice Merida, and they got Kelly MacDonald instead. I'm happy because having her doing a fake Scottish accent would have been horrible, probably. And so Brave, I saw that one in theaters, and I didn't know what to think about Brave because the first trailer kind of made us think it was really mysterious, like something interesting was going to happen. And Brave, a lot of people dislike Brave because of the switch in the second act and also because it has a lot of childish humor, like Cars, but less considerably. Not as downplayed. But I liked Brave. I liked Brave a lot, actually. I enjoyed Brave. And 2012 had some pretty great animated films, like Thinking Back. But Brave was, I thought it had a good mother-daughter relationship film, and even a mother, waiting to be independent. So, during the second half, it switches the trailers never really lead you to believe this, but it switches into the story of the mother turning into a bear, which is what some people didn't like because it's such a shift in tone. Some people, but I honestly thought that was a pretty interesting plot twist, even though some people jokingly call it Mother Bear, in a reference to the fact that it has a similar plot line to the previous Disney film Brother Bear, except kind of different. And this one's in CGI. But it was really good, and I cried at the end. It got me emotional, so it worked. And so that kind of, talking about those films, those are our Pixar films. They made 13 animated features in about 18 years. They were supposed to have Inside Out come out this year, but it got delayed till next year. Not exactly the best of signs, but I'm glad that they're trying to work on it. So that brings us to Pixar's next films. Like I mentioned, Inside Out would have come out this week. Inside Out has such an incredible plot line. A movie inside the body of a human being. A movie inside, going through the emotions, everything. That has a huge potential. And I think that could potentially be another great Pixar movie, because we haven't really had, in terms of really being emotional, just being overall emotional. Toy Story 3 was the last one. Some people say Pixar has gone through a slump, but I would disagree with that. It's just that new people enter, so different minds. It's the same thing with the Disney, when we went from quote-unquote the Disney Dark Ages to the Disney Renaissance. It's because new people came and they had new animators who were still trying to get their groove on. It just took a few films in order to really get something working that was great. And the same thing applies to Pixar. So Inside Out has a lot of potential. I'm kind of iffy on Finding Dory. As much as it's obviously an attempt to go back after the flopping of John Carter, Andrew Stanton's attempt at doing a sequel to Finding Nemo, I don't really think it deserves or really needs a sequel. I could see it being a big hit, but I don't think there's really a lot. I mean, it works better as a single one-shot movie, but if it's going to explore Dory's character more, then I guess there is some potential. Gonna have to wait because we haven't seen anything for that. Like, Pixar is very mysterious. They don't reveal a project until sometime later. Like a lot of animation studios, except unlike DreamWorks, Pixar doesn't tend to advertise their big name stars because they get a lot of big name stars. Not all of their films. DreamWorks just loves to build up those movie stars. Like the only thing they can sell their film. Pixar is the complete opposite. That's why they're kind of better in a lot of regards. But yeah, Finding Dory. Then there's The Good Dinosaur, which is another film that has a lot of potential. And that one has the guys from Up working on it, so I'm expecting something pretty good. Up is another one of my favorite Pixar movies. Up has one of the best openings of any Pixar movie ever. Actually, I think it has the best opening of any Pixar movie. Just the whole, the song played, the music playing, and them growing up and getting older, and then the wife dying. It's just so well, and the movie itself is really an adventure story of, the old, the young, and the old. How, you're never too old to accomplish your dreams. And it's got a great villain, a great climax, everything. It's one of Pixar's most beautifully animated films, and I think Up is one of their finest. It's probably the perfect Pixar movie. Just overall a good time. You can sit down and watch it again and again. Never gets old. I love Up. I was rewatching it actually earlier, and it really does hold up. It's just one of my all-time favorite animated movies ever. So they're going to make the same team that made Up is working on The Good Dinosaur. Except Bob Peterson apparently left, or at least he still worked on it, but he got into an argument But The Good Dinosaur is basically about a dinosaur with an inside out, whatever. Good Dinosaur is about a dinosaur in modern times. I think the story has a lot of potential. I haven't seen much from it. We haven't, of course, Pixar doesn't tend to release a lot of images. They just release a fake teaser to try and get us hyped for their next film. So I'm anticipating The Good Dinosaur. I think it has a lot of potential. So 2007 brought us Ratatouille. Brad Bird's return to Pixar after only 3 years saw this very clever, very creative movie about a rat in France who tried to, a rat who runs away to, and his rats who run away to France, and one of them, Remy, who wants to become a chef. As the tagline says, he's dying to become a chef. Ratatouille, I'd say out of all of Pixar's films, this one has the most pizzazz, I guess you could say. The whole concept, it's just clever and creative. And there's a lot of adult humor. And I mean, The Incredibles is a fun movie, but Ratatouille is a much funnier movie in that regard. But it's what they do best. I mean, they create these stories, these characters, and you really feel for them, and they really build them up. And it's stuff like that that makes me why I really like Pixar. So Ratatouille is no different. I just think Remy's a great character, and the whole thing works well. I mean, Brad Bird does his thing again, and I can't wait to see what Tomorrowman is like, his next film. He's doing live action now, since he did Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. And then another movie that I talked about was WALLE, which came after. WALLE, the first half of WALLE is great. It's probably the best part of the movie. Well, WALL-E's on Earth. He's the only one there. Earth has been abandoned. We're heading into the future. It's now a barren wasteland. But while he looks around, he's left behind. And he watches Hello, Dolly. And, I mean, it's just great. And then when we get to the part where Wall-E discovers Eve and he goes into space, it's still really good. It gets more adventurous. He goes out there, he's flying through the solar system. And we discovered that mankind has become fatter, lazier, and they do things more instantly in space. Everybody's chubby. They're flying around on another, space debris or whatever. But, the film, I mean, the relationship, the romance or relationship between Wall-E and Eve is really well done. They're robots, but they really have sentimental feelings for each other. And I thought that was one of the best relationships in a Pixar movie ever, along with Carl and Ellie from Up. And Wall-E, Wall-E is just a fun, it's emotional, it's adventurous, it's everything I want in a Pixar movie. Wall-E is also notably the very first Pixar movie to have live action in it. Fred Willard appears as the very first live action Pixar character, the president, in recordings. Real life. There's also the way they insert Hello, Dolly into the film. I wondered if Pixar would ever do a live action film, but apparently they're not interested, though they did try it in that film, and very well done, very well played. So that's my overall conclusion about Pixar is, despite the recent quote-unquote sluggish years of Pixar, I'd say they're basically one of the most consistent companies I've ever seen, movie companies ever. When I go to see a Pixar movie, I expect quality, and more often than not, I'm not disappointed. I love Pixar, and I hope Pixar continues into the future, well into the future. Pixar has so much coming for them. The people who run Pixar, they're geniuses. John Lasseter, he's now the head of all Disney Animation, and he really helps the creative juices flow. I like Pixar, and I hope nothing ever happens to Pixar and they don't go completely down the crapper or something. That's my overall thoughts on Pixar. I hope you enjoyed this show.